Basically, when you look at the stories of Elizabeth Bathory's behavior, it seems like she is trying to build a flesh interface. But it is known that in order to invent a flesh interface, one must be under the influence of LSD for extended periods. As LSD hadn't been invented during her life, it's probably just a coincidence. Still a tantalizing theory, though. Obviously, I can't define a flesh interface in terms of purpose or composition or mechanism. I can only list the various phenomena which are related to them. Chief among these is the creation of an incident zone wherein objects are spontaneously segmented, i.e., parts of the object simply disappear, yet the objects continue to behave as if the missing parts are still present. Also, you see complex tunnels created in the earth. These have been termed ant farms. In undersea interfaces, you get chitinous cruciform organisms. These sui generis organisms are thought to be the result of evolutionary processes which took place in an environment other than the Earth. This is speculation, but in this case, I agree with it. Then there have been the giant metallic cylinders which appear and experience continuous spontaneous segmentation. These are usually at least 10 meters in diameter and can get much larger, and only occur in very large interfaces, i.e. portals. Beyond this, the phenomena are too various to mention, and different for each interface. Many people think that a portal is simply a large flesh interface. This is true. A portal is a large flesh interface, but it is also more than that. A portal is, as the name implies, a way of sending objects between the portal site and wherever the various locations that have been found beyond the portals are located, i.e. the so-called alien sister cities. Portals are usually, but not always, accompanied by the large, fluctuating metallic cylinders. The largest above-water portal that I know of occurred in Novaya Zemlya and existed for several weeks before it was destroyed by the Russians' so-called Tsar Bomba. In this case, the metallic cylinders were miles high and covered with features rarely seen on other cylinders: blinking lights, nodules, so-called antennae. They took on a very artifactual appearance, i.e., they seem to be constructed technology rather than naturally occurring phenomena. Are the cylinders themselves artifacts being sent through the portals, or are they phenomena created by the flesh interfaces in the way a mushroom cloud is created by a nuclear explosion? This is unclear. I wish I could show you guys pictures of the Novaya Zemlya cylinders. They truly were beautiful, rising miles into the clear Arctic air, like great alien towers, tinged blue by the vastness of the distances involved. Though it was certainly necessary to destroy them, and we owe the Soviets a great debt for their tireless efforts to collapse the interface, I sometimes wish they were still there. At least then, there would be something, some evidence. In response to what the CIA had accomplished with their Antarctic station in Artigas, the Soviets built a larger station in Novaya Zemlya in the Arctic. 30,000 prisoners and an exceptionally pure gas concentration created a flesh interface which went through all 7 stages in less than 13 minutes and became a full-fledged portal. Within a day, the typical fluctuating metallic cylinders were visible, and within 3 days they were extending miles into the sky. The Soviets quickly realized that the portal was growing out of control. In previous instances, they had simply bombed the site from the air, but in this case, the enormous cylinders and attendant incident zone extending to the edge of space prevented this as well as missile strikes. There was also an exceptionally large lateral incident zone around the portal, with segmentation occurring miles out from the site. Alarmed by the zone's uncontrolled growth and the growing underground tunnels, aka ant farms, the Soviets worked feverishly to construct a hydrogen bomb of unprecedented power, which could be detonated from outside the incident zone and still collapse the portal. The steady rate of growth in the incident zone provided them with an exact deadline, which they managed to meet with only 2 hours to spare. Any later, and the bomb could not have been placed so as to collapse the interface. In short, the world came within 2 hours of being subjected to an uncontrolled flesh interface and perhaps the end of civilization as we know it. Before the portal was collapsed, however, the Soviets had gained first-hand knowledge of one of the so-called sister cities. In other words, somebody had gone into the portal and come back. I've always found Lisa's dream to be a good starting place when trying to understand the psychological effects of travel. Lisa was a 9-year-old girl sent through the Groom City interface in 1975. The Groom Lake interface connects to the so-called sister city, technically persistent locus, known as the Hanging Temples. She stayed there for 5 days of normal time, but only 48 seconds of beyond time, a marked discrepancy. Upon returning, she did not recall anything beyond becoming drowsy for a moment. She slept well that night, and in the morning she recounted a dream to the doctors before dying later in the day. A direct transcript of the audio from her interview. It was spring, and it had been raining all day, but the rain stopped just before it was going to be sunset. So all the clouds were purpley, and the sky was really orange, and the grass was still wet with rain, and there were fireflies around, like all in the sky, way up in the sky, big ones. And me and my grandma went out to these hills way out past the edge of town, and under the hills there were people sleeping. Not in caves. They were buried under the hills. People were asleep, but they were hugging each other. Families, like moms and dads and little kids, just packed together, a few thousand. The hills were just blown up like balloons because they were so full of people, like a pregnant woman's stomach. My grandma told me to lie down, but I didn't want to. She laid down and got sucked into the ground. I heard her voice coming out of the ground, telling me to come inside. It would be easy to say that the Soviets discovered the secret of survivable travel because they were more ruthless, more willing to sacrifice innocent lives. But there was really no lack of ruthlessness on the part of the CIA. It was just a matter of approach. The Soviets approached the mystery of the flesh interfaces the same way they approached their space program. The first humans in space, the so-called lost cosmonauts who were never officially acknowledged, were just ordinary people, called from the gulags with no more control over their missions than Laika the dog. The Americans, on the other hand, started with professional men, usually from the military. Likewise, when it was discovered that objects and even animals which entered the flesh interfaces occasionally returned unharmed, the Americans began training men to enter the interfaces. Because they called their men from certain military ranks, they were all of similar ages. The Soviets, however, used prisoners who had a much wider age range, and so they were able to discover the essential correlation. The younger a person was, the more likely they were to survive travel, and the longer they would survive after travel. They discovered that 20-somethings were much more likely to survive, albeit in a horribly altered state, than older people. They discovered that people in their early 20s fared better than those in their late 20s. Teenagers fared even better. So despite all moral compunction, it was really a matter of time before they sent a child through. And it was only after the first round of children went through that they gained any idea of what was on the other side. Until we found the village, we had suspected that the detectors were just props, just toys given to us by the CIA guys to reassure us. Nobody trusted the spooks. 3 days through the jungle, and these detectors had not detected a fucking thing. But before we even saw the first hut, the needles on all the detectors started moving in unison. If they were phony toys, it was a cool little special effect. The needles swayed back and forth, and all the little metal boxes let out this spooky woo 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 sound all in unison, like a school choir. Very weird. We turned them off. As instructed, we treated every Vietnamese as combatants and killed them all. There wasn't any resistance, though. A few had weapons, but most were unarmed. None fought back. They didn't even run. They were just sitting around, lazing in the sun, and we shot them where we found them. Grim work, and very weird. They probably spooked us out more than the detectors. It was like they were waiting to die. After clearing the village, we didn't know what to do, so we turned one of the detectors on and wandered around to see what was up. The detector started going nuts around one of the bigger huts in the middle of the village. We had already cleared it, but we went in again. There was a big altar inside, with candles and Buddhas and gold signs with dink writing and shit. We figured maybe one of the Buddha statues was setting the detectors off, but no. The hut was very hot and muggy. Even by the incredibly humid standards of Vietnam, it was incredibly, incredibly humid in there. Even the Buddha statues were sweating. Their faces were literally coated with drops of moisture. Everybody noticed that there was something weird going with the air. There was something off about the pressure. So we just tossed everything, picked all the shit up and tossed it out of the hut. Sure enough, when we picked up the big platform that held the altar, there was something under it. It was a pit, made of flesh, maybe 5 feet across and going down about 20 feet before curving out of sight. When I say made of flesh, I mean it looked like the inside of somebody's throat. Wet, reddish, flesh-looking stuff. We had heard of them building tunnels, but this was... We really couldn't even understand what we were looking at. It was breathing. The flesh kind of rippled and this hot air came out, and it felt and smelled just like somebody breathing right on your face, enough to make you sick. They told us we would know it when we saw it. Well, we saw it, and we knowed it. We radioed in the coordinates and got the fuck out of there.